Milo, great to have you with us today. Wonderful to have a chance to talk to you. I'm very well. Thank you so much. I wish you were here with me in D.C., but I see you up in New York, and we're excited to have a chance to talk. That's all right.
They've got me in this dark room in a skyscraper. I was so looking forward to meeting you.
You look like you're out over the New York skyline. I don't see a billboard with
that's a lie. That's a lie. It's a photo.
Well, that's why there's no advertisement for your book behind you, right?
Well, maybe there
we
should be. I should have brought a copy. You know, like drag queen style, like available at all good places.
Hello, here we go.
Good. I think people know about it.
They'll probably flash it up. Yeah, we'll see it. We'll see it. So, just in case anyone on the planet has missed it, you have just written and published your first book, Dangerous. And
I have.
I noticed from the table of contents that pretty much everybody hates you. So according
it does feel that way to me.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, according to the table of contents here, we have a number of people who hate you. I guess you would say that the progressive left hates you, the alt-right hates you, Twitter hates you, feminists hate you, Black Lives Matter hate you, the media hates you. The list goes on. So my question is, you've sold an awful lot of books for somebody who's hated by everyone. Who's buying the book?
That is true. It is now at week 4 on the New York Times bestseller list.
And
when Simon & Schuster dropped it, nobody else picked it up. Imagine a publisher turning it down. Can you believe
it?
Hard
to believe.
But it's hard to believe. But
I wish we all had a crystal ball.
Very happy. I have been very happy with the reaction. I think what happened is people. I had a little bit of a drama in February where something tumbled out of my mouth a year and a half ago or something,
right.
On one of those long late night live streams. I give like 7 hours of interviews a day, and occasionally something's going to tumble out of your mouth half formed that you don't mean, and so that happened, and I apologize for that, and what happened afterwards is why I love America so much. People are so forgiving, and if they believe that you gave a sincere account of what went wrong, and if they know that by and large you're a good, decent person putting out good, decent product, and they really want to hear more from you, then I think they're very accommodating and very forgiving.
That's
and
not
I didn't really do that much wrong in the first place.
My memory of the way that went down.
Yeah, and I think people have been great. The media, of course, are pigs and repugnant, but actual Americans are fine. They're lovely, wonderful, decent people, and they can see through the spin. They can see through the garbage, and I think that's, from my point of view, that's what happened in the last election too.
Who did you write the book for?
So the book is written basically for. my primary audience skews enormously younger than a lot of conservatives, and I think that's why C-SPAN. There was a bit of CPAC. There was a little bit of controversy about me speaking there because it's traditionally assembled by much older evangelical, social conservative Christian types, the sorts of people who really hate the president, and I think. Perhaps they are just off-put or unsettled by my style of conservatism, which is much more relaxed about certain social things, much more very strict about some social things like immigration and Islam that they're too terrified to touch, a little bit more, a little bit softer on this kind of like church of free enterprise. So that kind of populist nationalist thing that people now come to associate maybe with Steve Bannon, Breitbart, all the rest of it. I am a child of that, and I am a product of that intellectual hinterland. I do believe in that stuff. And most importantly, I believe in people's right to discuss it and defend it, and to discuss and defend anything.
So let me ask you about that, because it seems to me, and I'm sure to you, like the left has gone a little bit crazy with the election of Donald Trump. How do you explain that?
Well, there's an earnestness, and look, the left invented political violence, so it's pretty funny to now watch places like the Daily Beast and Vanity Fair, at last, finally, publishing articles of, maybe the left has a problem with violence too. Right. What do you mean too? You invented it. You literally invented it. They're the people who want social change. They're the people who want to tear down institutions and replace them with. Even they don't know. Of course they're the ones who are going to reach for violence when their arguments fail.
But Trump is a big change. What's the problem?
essentially, the difference, I think, between conservatives and liberals is that conservatives, by their nature, want to preserve things. They want to maintain the status quo, or at least they'd like change that has been properly looked into and researched and thought about, and they want change based on data, reason, logic, and evidence. And that's in short supply in the media currently, because the left believes in a number of conspiracy theories, a number of total myths. The gender pay gap is a myth. The campus rape culture epidemic is a myth, and there are dozens of others. Black Lives Matter's stated purpose is completely uprooted by the realities of who kills whom in America. There are all kinds of things like that. And as a journalist in Britain, coming to America and imagining this was going to be the land of the free, the country. This is the nation of the First Amendment.
Right.
I thought, perhaps foolishly, that this would be the country you could be, do, and say anything. And what I discovered is that is true, but only if you're left-wing. If you look at the beginning of the book, you'll see quotes from Sarah Silverman and people like that. Sarah Silverman, before she contracted feminism, was a really funny comedian. She used to tell great jokes about blacks, Jews, gays, everyone. These days, however, she's best known for screwing up on Twitter because she hasn't read into something properly but wants to virtue signal to her friends, with the result that she's becoming really unpopular. Right. Amy Schumer was never talented or funny, but had the right politics. So we were all instructed to find her not only brilliantly funny and incredible, but also beautiful. She's put on the cover of fashion magazines. And when you put someone on the cover of a magazine, you're not saying, look at this person. You're saying, be like this person.
Right. I agree with this person.
I don't think anyone in the country wants to be like Amy Schumer, particularly not after the car crash of a movie she just did with the poor Goldie Hawn, who came out of retirement, I think, to be in that abomination. Her leather special for Netflix, which was the least funny thing I think I've seen on Netflix, up against some stiff competition.
Well, let me ask you a question about...
in 2 years.
Let me ask you a question about change, though. You say conservatives...
You didn't let me get onto Lena Dunham, but let's leave that.
We'll come back to that. But you talk about conservatives wanting to preserve things, and yet you call yourself a conservative, I think. Do you consider yourself a conservative? Because you seem to like to change things.
I think that any movement that whether it is an intellectual movement or a social activist movement, requires people from all across the spectrum. So there's a chapter in my book where I really go for establishment Republicans. Yep. I really go for the Washington, D.C. types, for the sorts of people who are watching this program and who are coming into this determined to hate me. Right? And by the end of it, my goal is just that they hate me slightly less. Maybe they won't after this. But conservatives have accomplished absolutely nothing to win the culture wars in the last 30 years. They have somehow managed to scramble into office, but when they get into office, they do nothing with it. They don't achieve anything. They don't accomplish anything.
So are you really talking about Republicans or conservatives? What's the distinction here?
Well, I'm talking about the Republican establishment.
Right.
I'm talking about the think tanks and magazines in Washington, D.C. I'm talking about many of even some of the conservative imprints at major publishers. They don't take risks. Simon & Schuster ran at the first sign of trouble with me. I'm talking about, in particular, Republican politicians. All of the people that hate Donald Trump, massively ineffective, useless people who say one thing and do another, and whose values have drifted from what ordinary Americans care about so much that I don't think the Republican Party, minus Trump, can really claim to speak for anyone in America anymore except the super rich. The Democrats are right about that. And they've done a good job of, clinging on to power, but they've done a really bad job of making sure that they are a powerful and a presence to be feared in the arenas that actually matter. But because once you get to the Oval Office and Congress and the Senate, you've already lost the battle.
Exactly.
I'm talking about Hollywood. I'm talking about the media. I'm talking about college campuses.
So how do you change those things?
In this country, well, you do what I'm doing, which is you get attention, you start discussions. Nothing in the last 30 years has done as much to raise public awareness about the wacky politics on campus as the UC Berkeley riots that I triggered. Right. Now, plenty of people have gone to UC Berkeley and haven't been able to speak. Plenty of people have gone to colleges and had violent protests. But nobody's quite been able to generate nobody's quite been able to show the left for what they really are, like me. And so this book is about how I got to that stage. Who else is on the chopping block too, whether it's Silicon Valley, establishment Republicans, all of the various threats to free speech in America today, as I see it as a visitor from from Europe.
So tell us how you got
coming
here.
to America.
Tell us how you got here.
Then how do we get you back? How do we send you away? Sorry, I'm getting married, so good luck with... I'm getting married to somebody I love very much, so good luck with that. I'm afraid I'm here to stay.
That's exciting.
But I will tell you that I started at the Telegraph, which is, I suppose, our equivalent of maybe the New York Times, the Washington Post, but centre-right rather than centre-left, as they both are. And I got a really good training in British journalism, rigour and seriousness, but also mischief and fun and satire. And my mentor at the Telegraph was a great admirer of the way that newspaper had been in the 70s and the 80s when it published satirical columns, Peter Simple and whatever. And I picked up a love, as I think many Brits have, for quite subtle, sophisticated satire, sort of multi-layered provocation that's designed to outrage, amuse, and educate. That doesn't fit very well in America's current public sphere, where everybody's just desperate to be upset about something. So, for instance, at UC Irvine, I give a talk about why Black Lives Matter don't care about black lives. I do so as a gay Jewish immigrant with a black boyfriend dressed in police fetish gear with a giant black dildo water bottle. There's so many things that are wrong and interesting about it. I don't see anything like that happening in culture. I don't see any musicians taking big risks. Marilyn Manson, of all people, for instance, one of my heroes, should have been a Trump supporter, if only because of how much it would have annoyed everybody.
Right.
But even he crumbled. And even he did a music video that showed him decapitating or shooting, I don't remember, somebody who looks like Donald Trump. It was so disappointing to me that the heroes from the 90s that I grew up with, the dissident, mischievous, countercultural warriors who were being totally unfairly pilloried by the religious right in this country, who were without evidence claiming that their stuff could make you violent or make you whatever, didn't come to the defense of, Trump, me, Gavin McInnes, whoever you like in the broad spectrum of this new populist uprising on the right, which is the most interesting thing to happen in American politics for half a decade, which is why the left wants to call it alt-right and say they're all neo-Nazis. Well, they're not, and everyone knows they're not. It's so interesting. But what I found so disappointing, was that those heroes of mine from the 90s had basically gone soft. They'd gone native. And the only exception to that is Bret Easton Ellis, who is very careful about his public pronouncements, and just for questioning, established norms and politically correct utterances, and just for observing that he went to a dinner in Hollywood where nobody would admit they were going to vote for Trump, but everybody was planning to. He's now yelled at when he goes out for dinner in Hollywood as a racist and a Trump supporter.
Exactly.
That's why they don't do it, because it will destroy their careers.
So let me ask you
so I've been very disappointed even by Hellraisers.
But let me ask you about Hellraising, because you put on a fabulous show with your boas and your jewelry and your fabulous outfits. And I guess one question is, how do you make sure that people hear what you're saying if they might be too busy watching what you're doing or looking at you? How do they get past the show and hear the message?
Well, if you actually watch my shows, which most people don't, and if you just read the headlines and don't, if you just read the headlines, you listen to journalists, you believe what you read on Twitter, and you've never actually picked up my book and you've never come to one of my shows, I can imagine why a lot of people feel that question is pertinent. But I'll give you an example. I did a show about abortion. I am rabidly pro-life. And I did a show about abortion, and I started it. I was dressed, obviously beautifully, and I started it by handing out posters that were signed and numbered by me, like they were kind of, precious merchandise. Like Madonna was giving out posters to the people who made it into the front 3 rows. But they were photos of aborted fetuses, and they were so shocking, and so people were just like, "What? And then I came out and gave a talk that was rooted in studies, data, and evidence, whilst making fun of the hypocrisies of the progressive left. Right. If you actually read me, if you actually pick up a copy of the book, if you actually come to one of my shows, it's impossible to claim that just because I initially get people's attention with shock tactics and with showmanship, that there's no substance there. The left wants you to believe that there's no substance with me. They want you to believe I'm a clown. They want you to believe I'm an attention seeker. But it is impossible to maintain that position if you actually read anything I write or come to one of my shows.
So
just at the New York Times, for instance.
Let me ask you about stuff you've written, because I have read your book. I loved it, by the way. It was terrific. And there are a lot of really interesting things, as well as a lot of good statistics and examples. And so let me have you riff on a couple of things that you said in the book.
Sure.
One thing you said was, that I really liked, never again let the left tell you that they are the ones fighting bigotry. They are, in fact, its greatest defenders. Explain what you mean by that.
Well, what I'm seeking to do, the reason the left hates me so much is that I am kind of like living disproof of the two central tenets of American progressivism. One is political correctness. I am smashing that norm and demonstrating that nothing bad happens when you crack a joke that somebody says, "Oh, is that racist?" No, it was really funny, and all my friends thought it was okay, and go screw yourself, frankly. Two is because the main thing totalitarians hate, by the way, is the sound of laughter. They really, really hate it. This is in the book. The first thing to go in any new authoritarian regime is satire, because they don't want you laughing at them. And I identified that the thing the left hates the most, and this is why I take some credit for the tenor and the character of the populist nationalist revolution in America, because I started it by being the first person who stood up in the belly of the beast at UC Berkeley, UC Irvine, UW Seattle, and just laughed at them. I laughed at them. They are self-evidently ludicrous. These social justice warriors who believe in conspiracy theories, who want to break down, traditional gender stereotypes, otherwise known as science, and turn themselves into these hideous warthogs in the process, and then complain that nobody wants to have sex with them. I am, laughing at them because because nobody can resist the truth wrapped in a good joke. But the second thing, more pertinent to your question, which is really important, is identity politics. Yeah. And America, America has a disease, and it is that. And I never experienced this before I came here, by the way. I went to school with. I went to a fairly wealthy school in London, in London, and then in Kent, in the southeast of England, and. Nonetheless, we had a much higher rate of ethnic minorities in that school than wealthy schools in America do. So we had a lot of Asians, by which I mean Indian subcontinent. We had a lot of black kids in that school. And I'm thinking back to my school days, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, Angelo was cool. And there are 5 things I think about Angelo before I remember that he was black.
Right.
But over here, you meet somebody and you immediately start to make assumptions about them based on their skin color. And NBC News calls me a white nationalist, knowingly lies and calls me a white nationalist, while I've got these 10-minute rants in my college talks about how I hate this stuff, and I want people. If you're going to have identity politics, you've got to let white people do it too. But I would rather nobody had it, because it is poisonous and toxic when you judge people by their skin color, their sexuality, or their gender. These things are not relevant to reasoned debate about politics or about social policy. It doesn't oh, you're white, so you have no right to talk about X. This kind of stuff that has infected journalism, infected academia, and is now spiraling up into Hollywood, and you even start to see hints of it on screen, and you see it in casting decisions too. Like, only a trans person can play a trans whatever. I mean, Jay Davidson, who played a trans hooker in The Crying Game, and then I think more famously played Ra in Stargate, quit acting after those 2 roles because he didn't like the attention. He wasn't trans, but he gave one of the most compelling, beautiful, and brilliant portrayals of the challenges and horror of being a transgender person in America.
Well, that's
like
what they
decades
call
before the
acting,
left,
isn't it?
Exactly. That happened decades before the left decided that trannies were the new big thing and that everybody has to bow and scrape to their pronouns. I'm sorry. But this idea that what you are is more important than who you are, that how you were born is more important than what you have learned, what you aspire to be, what your values are, who you are as a human being. I mean, if you took Martin Luther King's, I Have a Dream speech and told college campuses that it was said by Trump, they'd say it was racist. I mean, seriously, and I intend to do so on the next tour, by the way, and it's going to be hilarious. We're not just that, but we're going to take a bunch of different quotes from different, black activists and say, oh, this was Jeff Sessions. What do you think about this?
So are you doing a trolling tour? Is that what you're doing?
It is called Troll Academy,
there
which
we
is
go.
in itself a
Troll Academy.
Well, so the last tour, I don't know if I'm allowed to say the name of the last tour on C-SPAN, but you can look it up. The Dangerous T tour was designed to introduce me to American college campuses and me to America at large. The book, I think, has now done that to a much wider audience. We've sold well in excess of 100,000 copies of the book. First month, I think I made 1.2 million in the first month on the book. Because we make so much more money now. We're publishing.
Excellent. Yes, that's one of the big problems.
It's doing really, really well.
It is
astonishingly well. And with Berkeley Free Speech Week coming up, which is a big festival of free speech, in which I'm going to invite all of the people the left hates the most to UC Berkeley for a week-long celebration of mischief making. I think is going to do good things for the book too. But yes, that kicks off, that Berkeley Free Speech Week is going to kick off my 7-month tour. We have dates in South America, dates in Australia, dates in London, Germany, Sweden, and of course all over the United States. I think we're doing 10 dates in Florida, 10 dates in California.
It's called Trolling Academy.
Troll Academy.
Well, tell us what trolling is.
So the purpose... Well, in my book, I make a distinction between trolling and mere cruelty. And in my view, trolling done correctly, trolling done for a higher purpose, is intended to reveal things that polite society won't tell you or isn't allowed to say. Mm-hmm. So I like to think of myself as a sort of virtuous troll, like trolling for the good Lord, And I will provoke... No, I mean it.
A virtuous
I will
troll.
provoke...
I thought you were a supervillain.
Well, supervillain's always been a bit of a joke, It's like
right.
I tell jokes that only my fans get, and that everybody else, because everyone in America is so earnest, everyone else takes it at face value. Because no offense, but y'all don't really get irony. Like I can, and this is a constant risk
battle
of being a European in America.
Right.
It's like, I call myself the most fabulous supervillain on the internet, and nobody in America picks up from the word fabulous that I might be saying that slightly tongue-in-cheek. Mm-hmm. Because if I were actually a supervillain, I might not describe myself as fabulous.
Probably wouldn't.
Why does nobody here get this? Like, what is happening?
Although you might have a fabulous costume. I mean, most supervillains do.
Well, I like to say I'm wearing my new favorite tie for you today.
Thank you very much.
I'm hoping that my costume, even my grown-up C-SPAN outfit is fabulous.
It is.
But no, I mean, like, nobody in America seems to understand that the most fabulous supervillain on the internet might just be a bit tongue-in-cheek. Like, come on.
So trolling.
Part of the reason for this. Yeah, but part of the reason for this, and this feeds into the trolling thing, is that America's kind of forgotten how to laugh because everyone's so terrified of telling any good jokes. Have you heard a good joke on TV recently?
No,
I haven't.
That's true.
I mean, look at the John Oliver special about Alex Jones, right? Mm-hmm. So John Oliver is roasting Alex Jones for 22 and a half minutes, and he doesn't land a single punch. He doesn't tell a single good joke. Now, let me tell you, I happen to like Alex. I don't agree with a lot of what he says. I think he gets something spectacularly wrong. But I think he's sincere. Yep. And I did a big interview with him that went on YouTube the other day that was done phenomenally well. It's just like a serious sit-down between me and him, because I want to get to the heart of the guy. I find him fascinating. Whether or not he's crazily wrong about some things, I find him as a human being fascinating. And I tried to ask him the serious questions that Megyn Kelly didn't. And I just found that people like him and me, we're performance artists to a degree.
Right.
We are, we don't mind being clownish, though I wouldn't describe us as clowns. For the C-SPAN audience, I suppose the best analogy is going to be Falstaff. We don't mind people laughing at us if we're the only people telling the truth in the room.
That's right.
And okay, nobody in the court realizes it, but everybody watching the play does.
Exactly.
And the court, as the American establishment, they don't get me. They're too stupid. I have got to tell you, American journalists are the dumbest species in the world. I've met journalists and practiced journalism in 5 different countries, and American journalists are by a clear margin the dumbest people in the world. These people with IQs of 95 trying to interview those of us who have IQs of, well, I won't brag, but and they're just not capable of understanding subtlety or nuance. And where they detect it, they use it as an opportunity to cry racism. Anything remotely ambiguous, racist, sexist.
I know. It's an
for
easy
me,
accusation.
trolling is, for me, Trolling is about sweeping away all concerns about what people might say about you or think about you, safe in the knowledge that if you tell the truth and you do it in an entertaining way, that you will win way more fans than the media has made enemies for you.
Right.
And I am proof of that. Donald Trump is proof of that.
Yes.
There are plenty of other people in this new populist, new right movement on the internet who are proof of that. I'm probably, with the exception of the president, I'm obviously, the biggest personality in that ecosystem. But there's lots of us, and what they all have in common, what they're all realizing, is that there are things that even right-leaning publications will brazenly and knowingly lie to the public about, and that's not okay. The reality described by the media versus the reality out there. They're like this.
But let me ask you something. You said something really interesting in your book about media bias, which I thought was fascinating, because we all talk about media bias. We face it a lot at Regnery. I know you've faced it, ever since you came here. But you said that social media bias is far more dangerous than mainstream media bias. What does that mean?
Oh my goodness, are you kidding? It's not even close. The good news is no one trusts journalists anymore. Like fewer than 40% of Americans trust journalists, and they're right not to trust journalists, and nobody did that to them. Trump didn't do it to them. I didn't do it to them. They did it to themselves. They consistently lied by omission, misrepresented things, covered wall-to-wall coverage of Russia when there was no evidence of anything, and then little tiny coverage of things that Americans might actually want to know about. You can't trust any major broadcast news network to actually tell you what's going on in your own country. That's horrifying. And Americans are responding, according to the polling, with their feet and with their contempt.
Yep.
They're just tuning out. Look at the. There are women who vote for Trump who voted for Trump who don't like the guy, and when they're interviewed about it, they said, "Well, the media went for him so hard, I realized something was up, and I just stopped listening to the noise.
Right.
I watched him, and I watched Hillary." And I decided I didn't want Hillary. And I just stopped listening to what the press had to say. That is, I think, what's coming for every journalist everywhere if they don't raise their game, if they don't up their professional ethics.
So what does that mean about social media?
That problem is nothing compared to the threat of Silicon Valley. And the politics, which are even crazier than the politics of the mainstream media. The mainstream media is like medium left almost exclusively on everything, right? And Trump is perceived as being very right-wing. I don't think he's very right-wing. I think he's center-right. But because of the language he uses, he's like smashing through like political correctness taboos, which of course I love. That's why I love him so much. I don't think it's any secret. But that's really important because he maybe unwittingly even, is the primary defender of the First Amendment in America today. And there isn't a close second except perhaps for me. He is the guy who is emboldening people to say how they really feel without being afraid. And sociologists call this preference falsification. Before the fall of the Berlin Wall, you had people who were like, oh, yes, communism's wonderful, I love living here. And then the minute it fell, suddenly everybody was a Westerner.
Right.
Well, that's called preference falsification, where everybody says they believe things they don't for an easy life. For instance, yes, I'm a feminist. When everyone's like, actually, these people are insane, man-hating bullies who tell lies, but I need an easy life and I don't want to get hauled into HR, so I'll say I'm a feminist. Right. With Silicon Valley, if you look at the politics of Twitter, which has Black Lives Matter, on the wall of their San Francisco offices, they're figuratively, and I'm sure in some cases literally, in bed with Black Lives Matter activists. If you look at Google, who this week fired a guy for circulating a reasonable, calm, fair, totally scientifically justified entreaty for Google to perhaps listen to other points of view. He was fired. He was fired for precisely the reason that he suggested in the memo, which was that Google is utterly intolerant of politics that differ from the politically correct, top-down, far-left social justice consensus about feminism, Black Lives Matter, transgenderism, all the rest of it. And these are all things about which the science is far from settled.
So
or the data or the numbers are far from settled.
But in your book, you talk about how, not just how the people in Silicon Valley and people running Facebook and Google and Twitter are crazy lefties, but also how that pervades the social media that we all live on, especially everyone under 30. What's the insidious
I'm
bias
patient
there?
zero. I am patient zero of
Right.
this because I was the first high-profile person to get banned from Twitter for being too funny and too effective. It wasn't because of anything I said. I mean, New York Magazine, which is pretty far left, admitted in print there's nothing he says which steps outside the respectable, reasonable, conservative mainstream.
Right.
You know, I don't think they used the word respectable and reasonable because they wouldn't describe conservatives like that. But they said there's nothing that he says that you wouldn't hear on Fox. He just tells bitchy jokes about it. Oh, a gay guy's catty. Stop the presses. You know, but it's like they didn't ban me because of my opinions, because I don't believe anything that millions of ordinary Americans don't believe. I'm just too clever and funny and effective and dangerous to them, so they had to get rid of me. And they waited for me to have a run-in with a black female actress because, of course, disagreeing with a black woman is you know, on any terms for any reason
and is racist.
Is completely off limits. And you know, the funny thing about that, I mean, the reason that people like me so much is they see the gap between how I'm described and the reality. And the people who like me, my fans, went to read the review that I posted of Ghostbusters. And what did they find? I actually defended Leslie Jones. I defended Leslie Jones in a way that many of my fans wouldn't have liked.
Right.
I said, I think it's kind of sad that a black woman on TV has to do this routine, right? This stereotypical black female character. Why can't we just have a woman on screen who happens to be black, right? No, we have to have her doing the whole, like, whatever routine. You know, and I defended her. I said I was sorry she was directed into that. And then on Twitter, of course, I made fun of her because why not? I'm sorry, a journalist can't make fun of a celebrity. Give me a break. I said, you know, I was making fun of myself. I said, I'm glad they cast a hot black dude. You know, making fun of my own sexual preferences and making fun of the fact that she's ugly, which she is. What, now a journalist can't call a celebrity ugly?
And you get kicked
is that
off
where
of
we've
Twitter
got to?
for that?
In the land of the First Amendment.
Right.
And then, of course, journalists willingly lie, and they, of course, are all friends with people at Twitter. They willingly lie to credulous readers, saying he whipped up a storm of racist hate. It's like, no, I'm sorry. Do you say the same thing about Justin Bieber when he breaks up with Selena Gomez and has public rows with her, knowing that she's going to get death and rape threats? No. Do you say the same thing to Beyonce when she has a row with Taylor Swift, knowing that Taylor Swift is going to get death and rape threats? No. It's a double standard, and it's only applied to conservatives.
It is.
So, you know, the problem of the media is sort of being solved, I think, by the free market. The interview that I did with NPR, which they won't air because I came across as too reasonable and likable, eventually we bullied them into airing about 4 minutes of it, which I posted in full on my YouTube. You know, I explained this stuff, and I said, you know, well, the problem is they don't really want to describe people fairly and accurately because they're worried that people might see a conservative and find them really interesting and persuasive and reasonable. So they have to caricature us. I mean, I have been called everything. I've been called sexist, racist, white nationalist, homophobic, a pedophile.
So let me ask you this.
Just,
you
name it. It's been in the pages of a major newspaper.
But you have a pretty interesting ally right now, somebody defending you that I wouldn't necessarily expect to see next to you, and that's the ACLU. So tell us how you and the ACLU have somehow come together in a fight for free speech.
Well, once every millennium, the ACLU gets it right. No, I don't mean to be mean. They approached us, actually, which I was impressed by. And they, you know, my hunch with the ACLU is the people that actually run it, I don't think they'll mind me saying this, the people who run it are pretty sound. They're pretty good on the First Amendment, they're pretty reasonable, they're pretty fair. But they have trouble keeping their troops in line because they have a bunch of like 25, 30-year-old activists who are like off the deep end, crazy social justice warriors, you know? And those crazy social justice warriors require the ACLU to hate me, or they'll quit, or they'll cause a fuss, whatever. So we expressed our concerns about the language that they were going to use about me in their whatever, and the top brass agreed and said, well, look, you know, you're not wrong. So they approached me. We agreed on how we were going to talk about each other, given that I hate every position they take apart from maybe this one, you know. But there's the higher principles involved are what matters, and so you got to give them their dues. You got to give them credit for coming to me. Now, what they were attempting to do, which I think they've done fairly and accurately, is show that the First Amendment is bipartisan and is a higher principle and a more important thing than any one plaintiff and any one complaint. So I am the lead plaintiff in a case that includes Carafem, which sell like 10-week abortion pills. I can't think of anything more disgusting and hideous on the planet. I think these people are murderers. But they should be allowed to speak. They should be allowed to advertise, I don't know whether they should be allowed to do what they're doing, but since they are, then they should be allowed to advertise. PETA, I think, are deranged. And I wanted to do a press conference, and they wouldn't let me. But I wanted to do a press conference, and I wanted to show up in like chinchilla and leather boots and like a lovely little Gucci leather hat and say,
standing next to
nobody
PETA.
here agrees. Exactly.
Yeah.
Nobody here agrees with anyone else on anything. I, for instance, am in a $30,000 chinchilla coat today. You probably think that's disgusting, but we can all agree. I wanted to, but they wouldn't let me. But the point is that there's a higher principle, and it is that the government should have no business in deciding what speech is quote-unquote controversial. The government shouldn't have an opinion about that.
Right.
And they also shouldn't bow to pressure from people, because my ads, all their other ads were rejected. But my ads weren't. My ads, they asked for some changes. We made those changes. Then we put the ads up. They were on the Washington, D.C. Metro. They were up for 10 days or something, and then people started to complain, and they took them down. So they basically bowed to pressure from social justice activists and took down posters because they have such woolly guidelines. I won't even quote them for you because they're meaningless, but they basically gives them enough wiggle room to do whatever the hell they want. And that's not okay. The government has no business caving to activists. That's the heckler's veto. You're not allowed to do that. So they're wrong, and I'm suing them, backed by the ACLU, in a lawsuit with co-defendants I hate. But I think that is a co-plaintiffs rather that I hate, and I think that's an example of exactly how we ought to be doing things, which is people who, under ordinary circumstances, would never be seen in the same room together, coming together in service of a higher principle, which is the First Amendment, which is your right to be able to say and do whatever you want. And by the way, the Washington, D.C. Metro, we're talking about controversial content, saying the government, and our case, our suit says the government shouldn't be involved in policing controversial content. My posters were pictures of my face.
That's pretty
Literally
controversial.
With a press quote, a picture. Well, I don't know. My face is a hate crime now. Apparently, it was triggering too many. Maybe women were just fainting on the metro, and they, it became a health risk. I don't know.
I think is the word.
But I'm just kidding. But my face, a quote about me from the press, and the book title of the book. That's it. That's it.
Pretty shocking.
It is literally the least controversial thing I have ever done.
Right.
the least shocking statement I've ever made is putting a picture of my face up.
Well, here's another statement.
And it was just so shocking.
Let me throw this one at you, because I'm interested in what you think about this. You said in your book that those who are frightened of speech are almost always frightened of something else. What do you think the left is frightened about? What are they frightened of?
Oh, the left are frightened because they're losing, because they have enjoyed complete cultural dominance in all of the three major fields of culture: academia, the media, and Hollywood. And conservatives have done absolutely nothing to win in any of those environments. In fact, they haven't even bothered to show up to the fight. You get these, I'm sorry if there are anybody watching this, because they're probably C-SPAN viewers, but these overpaid, fat, useless, self-interested, corrupt idiots, yes, I'm talking about you, if you're watching this, who have accepted billions of dollars from rich Republican donors to form these think tanks and publish these policy papers and write long essays in magazines. What have you achieved? Nothing. Nothing. And these people have the chutzpah to call me a clown. What does that make them?
Well, so
I'm sure.
So how do you think?
2 years. In 2 years, I have done more to, first of all, draw attention to the. I mean, it's not even a sorry state. It is an apocalyptic situation on American college campuses, that they are now systemically incapable of performing their basic function.
No, agreed.
Conservatives have done nothing to fix it. I have. And there's so many examples of this. I mean, I have done more and I'm sorry to brag, but people are used to it by now, I think. I have done more for the image of gays in what you might call real America, whether it's the Midwest or the South, you know, by being a conservative and not being Carson Kressley or, you know, Ross Matthews or any of these, like, oh my God, you know, people on television, just being normal, funny, a bit sassy, but like not being a queen and having and demonstrating that it's okay, you know, if your son turns out to be gay, he's not going to end up like on a roof chained to a nuclear reactor getting hauled down by police, you know. You don't have to have those politics. I really, really like, excuse my, well, I'll rephrase it for your audience.
Okay.
I really enjoy the company of gentlemen, you know, and I am flamboyant and I dress gay and all the rest of it sometimes. But I really like the Bible, and I really like guns, and that's okay, you know. And I like small government too, and I don't really want to pay taxes, you know. So these two positions ought to be completely obvious. We have, you know, like guns. We have like celebrities and the media and politicians and everybody telling us, oh, don't be so mean about Islam and all the rest of it. Meanwhile, they're killing 50 of us in Orlando nightclubs and throwing us off roofs in the Middle East. And it's not ISIS, it's not terrorism, it is mainstream Muslim culture, right? I'm sorry to say it, but it is. You know, and the Muslims who come over here, they get even worse. They don't assimilate; they go the other direction. Look at the stats, the Pew stats from the UK, which show successive generations of Muslims getting more radicalized, not less, over time. Now, American Muslims are slightly different in some respects, as a Pew study that just came out showed. But there is a problem, and nobody's talking about it. Gay people should be lining up outside gun stores to protect themselves. That's just logic. And this is why, by the way, also, so many gay people support Trump, because they don't care that the White House didn't issue a gushing, fawning gay pride proclamation, you know? Like, oh, we're so happy to support equality and diversity and blah, blah, blah. Because for gays with, you know, IQs of above 80, they associate that with the sort of pointless pandering of the Democrats who have pandered to blacks and done nothing for them, pandered to gays and welcomed in radical Islam. You know, what gay people want to see is action, not words. And for Donald Trump to say, I'm thinking about a Muslim ban, I was at home like applauding at the television, you know. It's like, thank you, somebody's doing something. Now that's an unpopular position and not everybody is going to hold it, but it is at least logically consistent. And so, you know, I think I've done more for the image of gays, you know, in places like the Midwest and the South, than 30 years of, you know, pandering Democrats and gay charities. And after what they did following Orlando, the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, saying, oh, let's not let the hate win. And by the way, let's not let this turn into Islamophobia. Islamophobia. 50 of us are dead, and you're worried about a bit of hijab pulling. Gay people are not going to put up with this for much longer.
So you have a pretty interesting list of heroes. You mentioned Donald Trump, and you and Donald Trump share, frankly, a lot of the sort of disruptor qualities. You guys are both disruptors, and you have an interesting list of people that you name in your book that you actually you know, think of as maybe fighting the same fight, and they're pretty interesting. I mean, you've got Margaret Thatcher, Madonna, Tucker Carlson, RuPaul, Julian Assange, Donald Trump. What do these people have in common?
I think what these people have in common is that they all believe fervently in free speech and free expression. Now, if I had been doing what I do in the 90s, I think I would have been doing the same to the religious right that I am today to the progressive left. Because I've come over here as a visitor from Europe, and yeah, I am socially conservative, fine. But I would have come over, and probably fiscally very conservative, but I've come over here and I've identified what I believe are the threats to free expression and free speech. And I've done that by saying some outrageous stuff and watching to see who gets upset, you know? And although the establishment Republicans don't like me because they don't like the sight of their party crumbling from beneath them, well, they did that to themselves by ignoring their own voters, by, you know, I mean, if you hear some of the stuff Bill Kristol says when he thinks nobody's listening, some of the stuff he tweets, and then you tell that to somebody who works in a factory in Wisconsin or whatever, I mean, these people do not represent the voters at all, even a little bit. And it's just amazing to me. I've been here for what, like 2 years, a year and a half, and I seem to have a better grasp on, you know, what ordinary Americans care about, and these people are paid to know. You know, but what all those people have in common, and I think on the flyleaf of the book I also list Skeletor and Darth Vader too, because they're sort of villains, but they're campy, tongue-in-cheek villains, you know. And you know, I think what they all have in common is that they all had a natural disposition to irritate the establishment. They all had, and in their own ways, and with varying degrees of substance, they all accomplished something. I don't like the fact that Donald Trump clearly doesn't read. You know, he doesn't read books, and I don't think he has much of a grasp of policy detail. But then again, neither did Reagan. But his instincts are great. His instincts are fantastic, and there are other things that I like about him enough for me to be a fan. I don't like the fact that he doesn't read. I'm not going to lie. But plenty of other people on my list do read. Marilyn Manson, for instance, you know, much smarter than, and I think everybody knows by now because they've seen an interview with him. They realize that the shock jock persona versus the guy you get in interviews, they're the same person and they believe the same things. But there's obviously a lot of thought that has gone into Marilyn Manson, the creation, you know? And I think the more that I make inroads into doing interviews like this, the more that people realize the same is going on with me. You know, you listen to Madonna, you realize she's a brilliant businesswoman. Even if she's, you know, shoving things on herself and on a bed on stage and the, you know, the Like a Prayer video and all the rest of it. And she was very... to be honest with you, and I don't think this is too hubristic, I think this is true. If you imagine Madonna in the 90s, her videos being banned by MTV, and it created this sense that it was irresistible. Everybody wanted to see the video. Right. And because the video was also great, and the music was also great, but MTV was banning it for reasons that everybody under 40 thought was stupid. That's really what turned her into a megastar. Well, who's the closest to that today? Is me.
It sounds familiar.
It's me.
Right.
What's that?
That sounds like it's right.
I think it is. I think it's true. I think I'm a Madonna in the 90s, you know? Like, no, I mean, you know, C-SPAN is for a particular audience, but it's not a major, it's not a major mainstream media broadcast. I haven't been interviewed once. Not once. You know, Barnes & Noble, we had to fight them to get my books even in stock, you know? And they had these grayed out buttons where the staff couldn't even order it, you know? Some real shady stuff was going on over there, right?
But actually,
Simon & Schuster dropped it. The book hasn't been reviewed.
But you can turn that into great media.
Well,
People do respond
and of course
to that.
I did. And of course I did. They know, by the way, that I have a very interesting phone call that I recorded that I made to their Vice President of Public Affairs, which I will drop if they keep misbehaving. But and yes, that is a threat. I have, you know, all of these hills to climb, and I didn't really believe, you know this from Regnery better than anyone, the sorts of hills you have to climb as a conservative or someone who's at least perceived as conservative versus a liberal, right? Imagine if, like, I've had no mainstream media interviews. I've had no mainstream media book reviews. I'm never on television. Why?
And yet, you know,
the
second or third week. The second or third week your book was out, it was the number, I know, but you were the number one selling book in the country.
Well, I was the number one selling book in the country in week 3, and the New York Times put me at number 5 on the charts. And by the way, they described me as an alt-right provocateur, despite the fact that chapter 2 of my book is titled Why the Alt-Right Hates Me. You know? And I say in every interview that I'm not, and all the rest of it.
Right.
What it demonstrates, I don't want to get into that because it's too boring and it's too complicated, but you can read the book if you're interested in why I think that and all the rest of it. But what it demonstrates is that not only are they're not reading it and disagreeing with it.
They have a
and
narrative
saying,
that
this
they
is too dangerous. They haven't opened a copy of one of their own best-selling books. The New York Times is printing the New York Times bestseller list, and nobody in the building has opened a copy of it.
Well, this happens to Regnery all the time, so we're very familiar with that. Yes,
and it's not like they don't have them. I sent them 5.
In the end,
I sent them 5.
In the end, I'm not sure it matters anymore. It used to matter a lot more. I'm not sure it matters anymore.
Yeah, but think of it this way. You know, I think conservatives have this have this kind of optimistic view of things. But two things I would say: if the press gave me the same kind of love, attention, and lavish praise, which is they give to Lena Dunham and Amy Schumer, completely undeserved on the basis of nothing. These are talentless warthogs. You know, if they gave me that level of gushing attention, because I'm the same, just with different politics, really. I wouldn't have sold a couple of 100,000 books. I'd have sold 1 million. For real. because my book's actually good, and their stuff is trash. If Simon & Schuster hadn't wrongly terminated our contract pretextually because they said that one day they were gloriously happy with the manuscript, and the next day, oh, it's unfit for publication. Really? No. What they did a calculation, I think. What they did was they said, we're going to lose so much liberal business from hanging on to this guy that even though the book will be really successful and really profitable, there's a huge risk here. Well, guess what? You ain't entitled to do that. So you have to pay. So there's no provision for that in the contract, for you making a estimate of the effect on your other business elsewhere. You don't get to do that.
You were supposed to do that before you signed the contract in the first place.
Exactly. And in the contract, in the legal document itself, and I've never seen a contract like it, they specifically refer to me as controversial and a provocateur. They knew what they were getting. That's why they wanted the book, because they knew it would sell. But if that hadn't happened, imagine how many more copies I'd have sold by now. I think we had 75 or 100,000 pre-orders when Simon & Schuster cancelled the book, and that was in February, and the book wasn't out until June. I would have had 200,000 pre-orders. Pre-orders. It would have been one of the biggest books of the decade, if not the half century, if they hadn't cancelled it. It would have been colossally profitable and one of the biggest publishing successes ever. I have, against all the odds, against everything set up against me, the entire media establishment, the whole publishing industry, nobody would touch it. I have, against all of the odds, turned this into a New York Times bestseller.
Yeah, it's
and by the time I'm done with it...
Yep.
I'm just saying, by the time I'm done with it, I will make sure, I will do whatever it takes to make sure that I sell 250,000 copies of this book, and we're well on course to doing that, just so that I can show people the purchase orders from the distributors, because the Ingram's numbers, so not the Ingram's numbers, the book scan numbers, which you will know about, are always so far under, and my book in particular sells heavily in ebooks and a lot direct, because we publish ourselves, so it's bigger profit margins if we don't go via Amazon.
A really interesting publishing story. I've been in publishing conservative books for 20 years.
And nobody will write about it. Nobody covers it.
Well, here we are covering it.
And in fact,
really
the magazines who should, for the first time, because the Publishers Weekly, the bookseller, have only published stories about disappointing sales numbers and about the fact that, they're such liars. They see the book scan numbers and they don't add up to what I said, not realizing that this book has vastly disproportionately sold direct to consumer, because that's how we wanted it to happen, because we make more money that way, and vastly disproportionately in ebooks and all the rest of it, because my audience is so young, they will have Kindles, and they all buy it on their iPhones, and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, so and they're kind of like trying to insinuate without actually saying it that I'm lying about the numbers and all the rest of it. I got the reports from the people who print and distribute our books. I know how many we sold, and we're doing great. I made 1.2 million in month one.
All right, tell me
the math yourself.
Tell me this. You respect people who read, as do I. What's your favorite book? Besides your own, you're not allowed to say that.
So it would be on brand for me to say my own book, wouldn't it? That would be. So the book that I would pick up and read over and over again. So I'll answer it in a couple of different categories, because your favorite book is an impossible question to answer. Politics. I think Ann Coulter is so underrated as a pundit, because nobody reads her books and they only see her kind of stirring the pot on TV.
Well, some people read her books. We sold, a couple 100,000.
Conservatives read her books.
Of Adios America.
Conservatives. Of course, conservatives read her books. But I'm saying her critics don't read her books. Her critics don't read her books, and as a result, I don't think anyone realizes how funny she is. She's so funny. And she's the funniest conservative. I mean, I pale in comparison to her.
But the great thing is, actually, about Anne is not only is she funny, but like you, she's also substantive. She has a lot of...
She's funny
works
and
really
she's substantive.
hard, and she has a lot in her book.
And she is she's got the same thing that I have, the same thing Steve Bannon has, which is she's a juggernaut. She just is so totally unfazed by the machinations and lies of the left. She's like a steamroller, She's like, what is she, a 13 times New York Times best-selling author? And the reason she is that is not just because she's funny and smart, but because she just doesn't give a hoot.
Right.
Like, say what you want. I'm in the right. You're an idiot. And every time she's on TV, she demonstrates it. But I think she's very underrated. As far as philosophy goes, I like Schopenhauer. I like Kierkegaard. I like Nietzsche.
Of course.
I don't so much, obviously.
Right.
No, but I like real Nietzsche. I like. He's primarily a philosopher of knowledge, not the Übermensch stuff that his sister kind of like turned into a Nazi thing. But like real actual Nietzsche, I find very interesting.
So give me a quick.
I love Schopenhauer.
Give me a quick thumbs up, thumbs down. All right. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah. Okay.
Bill Maher.
Okay. Bill Maher, thumbs up because he has the bravery. He's smart. I
did a
wouldn't
great
mind being the
interview.
centre-right Bill Maher one day.
Yep.
I wouldn't mind being the centre-right Bill Maher one day. That's not a bad aspiration.
All right.
I mean, his show gets, 3-4 million viewers a week? Mine, of course, would get 30 because there's a whole market open. He's fighting with other left-wing hosts. There's nothing on TV for conservatives.
All right.
So, I'd have
up.
a much bigger show, even if it wasn't as good. So,
But
thumbs
up.
up for him because he's brave enough to tell the truth about free speech in Islam.
Right. Sarah Palin.
Say again?
Sarah Palin.
I'm so sorry, I can't hear you saying.
That's okay. I said Sarah Palin.
Sarah Palin?
Yeah.
I love her. I mean, I
Thumbs
probably
up.
don't want her to be president, but look, I've met her. I think she is funny and genuine and serious. She was thrown into a world that maybe she didn't know how to operate, and very badly managed and very badly assisted. I think she was let down by everyone around her.
And definitely sabotaged.
And I think she was deliberately sabotaged from the right and the left, both sides.
Yep.
I think that she's the person treated perhaps the most unfairly in public life after me.
Interesting.
So she's I think she's great.
Good. Okay, Colin Kaepernick.
Next.
Is that a thumbs down?
I don't mind a bit of theatre and a bit of drama, but I want some substance, and he has none.
Right.
He has nothing to say. When you actually listen to him, he's parroting talking points he's read on the internet.
That's what
garbage. And the only reason, by the way, that his jersey sales went up is so people could burn them.
I like that statistic. Okay, here's one. The Pope.
That was a mean question.
Thank you.
You're paying me back for my for something. I don't know how much am I allowed to say without being excommunicated. I will say this: the previous Pope, Benedict, was my favourite.
It was a big thumbs up.
It was a deeply religious, intelligent, brilliant theologian. Beyond my understanding in many ways. Spiritual and kind and decent and wonderful. I think the previous Pope was tremendous. This Pope seems to crave... I think this Pope wants to be the new John Paul II. The problem is he doesn't have the charisma or the intelligence, and he seems to run his mouth about things in a very unhelpful way. And he's also... He perhaps also is being badly managed and badly advised because he has people around him. It's a good idea to go. Imagine this, right? You're the Pope's head of communications, and you're telling the Pope it's a good idea to have a go at Trump about walls when you live in the Vatican.
Not
so
good.
he's got bad people around him.
All right. So I know you give a thumbs up to Trump, but here's my question and maybe my last question for you. We were talking earlier. You and he are both disruptors. How does a disruptor, can a disruptor succeed as president? How does a disruptor succeed, and what do you see sort of for the future of Donald Trump?
So you have a structural problem in this country. The American system, the political system, works really, really, really well, with the exception of the president. Or maybe it's supposed to be like this, but it is. Let's just say it's a quirk inherent in the system. Now, in Europe, we have a constitutional monarchy, which means you vote for the CEO. Thinking about it in corporate terms, right? You vote for the CEO, but the president, the front of house, the whatever, is the monarch, and that's the best system, to be honest. In France, you have an elected president and an elected prime minister, and the president has all of the trappings of monarchy and all the expense that comes with it, but there doesn't really seem to be much point to their existence sometimes. And they really end up just sort of being, like ex-American presidents who still cost the taxpayer like tens of millions a year. Well, that's kind of like the French sitting president. Like, what's the point of you? In America, the president and the CEO are the same person. Right. Because not only is the president the guy who projects the image, he projects his politics and his personality and represents America on the world stage, but he also runs the government, He makes decisions about the inner workings of the federal government. That's a problem, because everybody who gets elected to the presidency is only really good at one of those jobs. Trump is a spectacular president in my view, I think he's spectacular at projecting things that Americans have been lusting for so long. Strength, America first, all that kind of stuff, right? Now, I know there will be very wide range of opinions on that. People think he's a clown, he misspeaks, all the rest of it. Yeah. But I like that thing that I think it was Atlantic came up with, whereas like Trump supporters take him seriously, not literally, and everyone else takes him literally, and they don't take him seriously.
Right.
Well, the Trump supporters are getting it right, you know? So I like him as I like him as president of the country, as CEO. You know, so I like him as I like him as president of the country. As CEO, I don't think his natural disruptive instincts, which work so well rhetorically on the campaign trail and in the presidential side of his role, I don't think are well suited to navigating the labyrinthine, corrupt mess of Washington, D.C.
Which is interesting because he was a CEO. I mean, he was a businessman, not a
but he was CEO of his own company, structured. No, but he was CEO of his own company, structured how he wanted it, of a company that actually functions, unlike the federal government, which doesn't. I mean, the reason that I talk about Silicon Valley versus to one of your earlier questions, the reason I talk about Silicon Valley now more is that Orwell was wrong, or at least didn't appreciate the full horror of the situation. Orwell thought the government was going to be the one coming to like beat down your door. Well, it isn't. It's private corporations, because the federal government's just too incompetent. The federal government can't really get anything right. There's too many of them, and they can't do anything. But private corporations are ruthlessly efficient, and when they decide they're going to go in a social justice direction with their corporate social responsibility and their human resources and their equality and diversity vice presidents and all the rest of it, these an entire subculture that just should not exist. When they decide they're going to go that way, they're dangerous. Silicon Valley, you know, you go to search for like this Google engineer that just got fired, it prompted somebody else to leak to the press that there is active suppression on social justice principles of Google search results. You search for American inventors on American Google, and you'll get like a sea of women and black people and all the rest of it, and all power to them. But they're not people who invented the telephone and the light bulb. When people search for American inventors, they want to know the famous ones who invented all the stuff around us, right? They don't want to get into the social justice reasons, the oppression, all the rest of it.
What kids were supposed to learn in first grade.
In school. They want to know who made the light bulb, who made the computer.
So who made the light bulb?
I don't want to get into in this particular interview, Bell, right? And in this particular interview, we don't want to get Edison, sorry.
Yeah.
Who was Bell? Bell was telephone. Bell's
all right.
Telephone, got it. Neither of those two people come up in the list of pictures when you search on Google in English for American inventors. But if you search from Google Spain, where they don't do the social justice garbage, you get Bell, Edison, Einstein. These people don't appear. You've got these nameless, like, these obscure, no-named, like minor people.
Well,
and of course, please don't. If I have to hear anything more about the abacus woman, what's her name?
Well, we don't want to hear any more about the abacus woman.
The supposed inventor of the computer who wasn't Ada Lovelace. Give me a break.
Well, listen, Milo, we've got to wrap up.
Gerrymandering search results is terrifying,
It is. And you are sometimes terrifying, sometimes dangerous, always entertaining, always provocative, always wonderful, and a very successful New York Times bestselling author. Congratulations on that, and congratulations on making a difference and trying to take us in a better direction. We appreciate it, even if sometimes we don't say thank you. I really
appreciate it.
Thank you.
I will, even if it's thankless, carry on until I drop dead. Thank you so much.
Please do.